Chris, welcome to the Nifty Travel Podcast.
Thank you very much.
And the thing I always like to ask my guests straight away is what your earliest memories of travel are.
Oh, that's a good one. Um, I was actually quite fortunate to move around a fair bit as a kid. So I think probably one of the most impactful memories of travel. When I was 11, I went to school in Puerto Rico for about a year and a half. We moved over there for my dad's work. So I think that was quite transformative in what's kind of ended up happening with the rest of my life from there to go from a small English village to then go to school in Puerto Rico on the other side of the world for a little bit sort of opened up my eyes to the wider world for sure.
So wow, yeah. So what kind of so that's more than a hint, isn't it? So I mean that's quite transformational to go and live somewhere else as a kid. I mean, how did it compare, as you say, to your rural village life before then?
Yeah, very different. I think having moved from the UK school system to a school that was following the US system, it kind of meant I was bottom of the class at everything. So school was not really an interest of mine at that time, but I was very interested in the outdoors and nature, and chasing lizards around, different bird life. Yeah, just to kind of go from a whole different culture as well. Puerto Rico has big Spanish influences. Um, just to see there was more out there. It was then very strange to go back to the UK and kind of get reverse culture shock to land back where I'd started, and it's like I'd sort of teleported for a year or a year and a half, and then was just sort of back back there again with this like crazy experience that no one around me could really understand.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's not an unusual reaction. So I suppose you saw uh, England in a completely different way then when you came back.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that maybe led to me always feeling like there was more out there. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, that was probably something that made me feel I always wanted to travel, and I wasn't sure whether the UK would be my home or not. So, yeah, it was interesting to go back and then, finish, enter secondary school and do that in the UK. And then I was pretty quick to leave once again once I finished that.
Yeah. So is that what led you to your first sort of overseas experience in France then, where you well, tell me about it. Was it River Leader?
Yeah, that's right. So I finished secondary school, wasn't sure what to do at uni, just knew I wanted to travel, and wanted to go on maybe an extended gap year. So I learned about the outdoors. I learned about kayak instructing, camping, rock climbing, hiking, and I did a 11-week course down in Cornwall to get entry level qualifications to do that. And then after a couple summers in the UK, I then worked as a canoe guide in southern France, and that was my first season working overseas. And yeah, again, once I'd done that, it just opened my eyes to that way of life, the seasonal traveling, or work/travel. So yeah, I did the one season in France, and then after that, every season I've done since then has been abroad.
Yeah, and because it's a very seasonal thing, you've swapped between water-based activity and snow. So I guess both of them have turned out to be very meaningful things for you. So tell me a bit about both. You know, why is kayaking exciting, and what gets you about snowboarding?
Yeah, it's very interesting in the outdoors. Most people they follow one season, so a lot of people they work as ski or snowboard instructors year round. They'll go northern and southern hemisphere chasing the winter, or the flip of that, they only do the summers and follow those everywhere. But there's not actually that many people that do the way I do it, which is summer and winter, and just kind of chase whichever one I feel like at the time. And I just find the balance and the mix just so interesting. I get to the end of winter and I'm just so ready to be on a beach, just in the sun or in the water, just relaxing. And then after a few months of that, I start daydreaming about snowboarding, and the feeling of snowboarding is just like nothing else. So yeah, I really kind of crave each of them. So again, that's another reason it's kind of hard for me to stay in one place, because I'm always sort of longing for that the other one eventually. So yeah, I really do enjoy both.
Yeah. And well, eventually, um, you ended up, well, where you're speaking from today, which is in Japan. So I guess, was that your first big adventure snowboarding?
Yeah, so my first season actually working as an instructor was in 2015. So I got my snowboard qualifications in Canada, where I was training, and then I went to Japan for work, and have wanted to come back ever since. And the visa system for Japan is a little bit awkward, where if you are a ski instructor, you only need a ski level 1, and then you can get it's kind of like a teaching visa to get back here. But if you only have a snowboard qualification, that visa doesn't actually apply to you. It's the way the wording, it's specifically ski, not snowboard. So it means to come back here as a snowboard instructor, you need 36 months of winter experience. So it's taken me some time to build to that, but finally I've hit that point, and then was just really keen to get back to Japan and just explore a bit more, see more of it, especially now as a more experienced instructor. I kind of see the mountain in a whole different way. So it's great to be back out and exploring Japan again.
So there's a big difference, isn't there, between the number of people who kayak in the world versus how many snowboard. Um, do you think snowboarding became popular because it initially had a bit of a reputation, and people are drawn towards um, I don't want to call it a naughty sport, but it was. Do you think, I mean, I was looking at, there are like 20, possibly 20 million people who like snowboarding these days. Do you think people are attracted to it because it was different to skiing?
Yeah, it definitely has some appeal. There's generally a bit of an edge to it. People who snowboard, I mean, some people kind of get a weird rivalry. I mean, it's good to joke around, but I snowboard with a lot of skiers all the time. I have ski instructor friends who snowboard too, but there's definitely a bit of an edge or a look to snowboarders. They are a certain kind of person, and some of the stereotypes are true as snowboarders. So yeah, maybe that's something that drew people towards it, and I guess just over years, it is a very different sport, a different feel. So maybe just like a generational thing, just takes time to come into play. If your parents snowboard, they're going to want to teach the kids how to snowboard. However, skiing can be a little bit easier for beginners to learn. So often that means kids get pushed into skiing because they're up on their feet nice and early, and then the parents can go and explore the mountain with them a lot quicker. And then it's not until they're teenagers that they actually give snowboarding a try, and then they'll maybe slowly move over to that one.
Yeah. So I noticed when I was looking through a list of snowboarding destinations that Japan is described as powder snow. So does that mean a bit like in the UK we always say there's the wrong kind of leaves? Is there the right kind of snow? Is it really different in all the different locations?
Yeah, it does make a big difference. The snow in Japan, it basically comes mostly over land. So it's the Siberian storms blow over. And then Hokkaido in the north of Japan is quite close to Russia and Siberia. So it's not traveled that far over water to pick up any moisture. So those really cold Siberian storms hit the north of Japan, mix with the Pacific Ocean, and then it comes down as very dry snow in massive quantities. Whereas in Europe and in North America as well, their snow often comes over water. So their storms come over water. So it's a bit damper. So it means it comes down quite thick and heavy, and it doesn't last quite as long feeling fresh. So yeah, there's a very different type of snow here. They call it Japao because of the powder that comes down. So it really is something to experience for those that are into skiing and snowboarding. If you've never had that before, you get we've been fortunate this season. Actually, we've had a record-breaking December snowfall. January wasn't as good, but February and March are also incredible, and we get a lot of what they call bottomless powder days. So you just can't feel the bottom. You're just as if you're like surfing through water or something. It's really, really incredible.
Oh, it sounds really different. As you say, I the only time I've ever tried skiing was in Europe, and of course that's a you get a great mixture of soft, hard, and slush, depending on whereabouts you are on the mountainside. Great variations. Um, so you also you went to China. Was that either of your favourites, or was that was like well let's see what China's like?
Yeah, China was a really crazy experience. That was, you know, very wild. I'd done some backpacking in Southeast Asia before that, but China is kind of like a different level because it's not set up in any way for the foreign tourists who don't speak the local language, particularly where I was because I was there working in rural areas. I actually ended up working there because a friend of mine had already gone out there, and I asked him how he ended up working there, and he managed to hook me up with a job, and then I stayed there for 2 summers, and it was just really really different. The outdoors at that time, this is 10 years ago now, was still sort of it was developing, but not quite as developed as in the West, in other countries. So a lot of the areas we were exploring, the local people had, one, never seen foreigners before, and two, never seen them doing what we were doing, which is hiking and camping. We'd often take groups out on Duke of Edinburgh Award certifications, so doing like multi-day hiking and camping trips. And I always remember this one time we were camping near to the Great Wall of China in one of the rural sections, and we pitched up our tents, and then all of the villagers, like the aunties, the grandmas, all the ladies, they came out with freshly cooked food to try and feed like us and all of the students. And we had to explain to them, we're doing this on purpose. Like, the kids are learning how to camp, they're learning how to cook. They're like, oh, we have rooms, come stay with us, we can fit everyone in there. Like, no, we're not homeless. Like, we are intentionally staying in these tents. So it was quite a funny interaction being translated from my Chinese colleagues, just explaining what hiking and camping is to these villagers that had just never seen someone do this before.
Yeah, and I guess one thing you discovered, and everybody I've spoken to who's been to China is well, China is a massive uh, country, and every region you go to is different in some respect. Was that how it was for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Every province of China is, it's like comparing different states in the US. Each one has their own style of food, they have their own culture, they have their own sort of minority groups that dress in a certain way traditionally. So there really is a lot to discover. Um, you could spend a lot of time there. I was there for 2 summer seasons, and there's still plenty of things to see, plenty to explore, and things I just don't know about. So yeah, it's a really fascinating place. Um, it's a hard place, I think, just to turn up as a backpacker and try and see it. I think they're a little strict on following or like booking tours with set itineraries. That might have changed a bit now, but to be there working and seeing the country with local staff was really cool.
Mm. So I see you've gone to a wide breadth of places. So what was it like in to kayak in Sicily? Like, no problem with the local food if you like pasta.
Yeah, it was a delicious place to go kayaking, that's for sure. Yeah, the food was great. Yeah, Sicily was really cool. So I was actually on the Aeolian Islands, which is just off of Sicily. These are volcanic islands. So the one I lived on was actually called Volcano, which is where the word volcano comes from. So yeah, again, really unique area to be paddling in. On the ocean there, it's very calm, which is great for beginner paddlers. And just wasn't that many people doing it. The local people aren't really into outdoor activities in that kind of way. They're more, hang out on the beach kind of people. So the company I worked for was the only one doing these kayak trips, which meant we could kayak around the islands, park up on the beaches, set up our tents, and then we'd walk into town and just go and buy dinner, have a couple drinks in town, and then back to the kayaks. So it was a very comfortable way of doing a kayak expedition where we actually didn't need to bring any food because, why go all the way to Sicily to cook food on the beach with a like tiny little frying pan and stove when you have all of these amazing Sicilian restaurants just a 10-minute walk away?
Yeah, and yeah, I imagine it's quite a laid back way of life. I mean, I only visited there for maybe a week, and well, I'm biased. I like Italy generally, but it seems quite a laid back country to visit, generally speaking.
Oh, very. Sometimes almost too laid back. If you're used to, being prompt and structure and this and that and everything is all orderly and whatever, you kind of have to get used to the island time sort of thing. Like if you go to a lot of Caribbean islands, they're all on island time. You just learn to relax, take it easy. You might say 10 o'clock, but it actually means 10:45, and it's not a big deal because of you're in paradise, so to sit and enjoy it. So yeah, it's good to like learn those lessons when you're there, just to fit into the local style and the local culture in that sense.
And as you say, it's probably a great location to go to for people who've not done a lot of kayaking before.
Yeah,
So
it's a great spot. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
yeah, so I was going to ask you about because obviously it's something you've clearly liked almost from the word go is you like the idea of uh, leading groups, helping people to become either better kayakers or surf boarders. Um, I was looking at some of the places that are described as favourite places, good place to go kayaking, and a lot of them stand out to me as being well, they're not average, they're not for the average kayaker. It kind of assumes a certain amount of um, experience. So, is there kind of like grades of destinations that people can go to? Is like how do you kind of guide people in that respect?
So it depends very much on the type of kayaking. So the style that I'm into is ocean kayaking, sea kayaking expeditions. So doing multi-day camping trips and using the kayak as a tool of transport. So we have all the food, all the camping gear, everything packed in the boats for 6 days at a time usually. And this type of kayaking is more about what you see and experience from the kayak rather than the activity itself. So, for example, people that go whitewater kayaking, it's a very advanced skill. It's pretty intense, big rivers, waterfalls, and stuff. It is a very high level type. Whereas sea kayaking, we're actually looking for a whole different set of conditions. There are obviously advanced sea kayaking where they want to play in big rapids and big storms, but the kind of trips I often do are more about escaping into nature, trying to find some wildlife, exploring a destination. So it means we're actually looking for a lot calmer conditions, which are sort of beginner to intermediate friendly. So I've had a number of brand new beginner kayakers have never sat in a kayak before in their whole life. They've joined me on 6 day kayaking trips and they've absolutely loved it. They've realized it's quite a straightforward activity to do. It's fairly intuitive, like pull one side, you go that way, pull the other side, go that way. It's fairly straightforward. And especially with sea kayaking, you are literally going straight forward most of the time because you just follow the coast and kind of swerve a little bit. So you don't have to do any fast turns or maneuvers. It's more about just using the kayak as a way to get away from people and get into nature, which then means you're only kayaking for maybe 2 hours, take a break, have a nice slow lunch, read a book, do some snorkeling, do some fishing, and it's more about what you do with the kayak and everything around you rather than the kayaking itself, if that makes sense.
All right. So it sounds as a you can pack a lot of things into a kayak. I was just I guess I was visualizing it's kind of you and whatever you carry on your backs, but you can actually load quite a few things.
Yeah, you can take a lot more than you would if you were hiking, say, because you don't actually feel the weight of it. You just load up the boat, and you can go for a long way. So the biggest kayak trip I've ever done personally, this was not with a group, but a friend and I did a 2.5 month kayak trip along the Inside Passage into Alaska. So that just kind of shows you the scale of which you could travel with a kayak. Obviously, we were getting some resupplies along the way, but you can pretty much go as far as you want to.
Yeah. So how do you even plan for a trip like that? Because that, as you say, you're looking to get away from people, but the area that you went to, I think, is not a particularly I was going to say well-worn path, but yeah, I mean, how did you choose that trip, and how did you plan for it?
So that trip, it was one I came across when I was working on Vancouver Island. It's called the Inside Passage, which goes from Seattle in Washington all the way to Skagway in Alaska. So it follows the whole sort of western side of Canada and then back into the States again. And I'd never heard of it before getting to Vancouver Island. And then once I was there, I started to become more familiar with the area and came across the Inside Passage as a thing that people do. It's kind of like a bit of a kayaker's pilgrimage for people in that area. Everyone wants to do it at least once in their life. Some people break it down section by section, and other people try and do as much of it in one go as you can. So yeah, we just came across it when I was there, and a guy that I was working with, Nuka, he was a pretty experienced expedition kayaker. So I ran the idea by him if he would want to join me for this trip, and he was really keen. So we just started chipping away at figuring out how to do that. Um, I guess the main thing in terms of planning is to try and break it down into a much smaller bite-sized chunks at a time. So rather than looking at it as a 1,000-mile, 72-day trip, you look at it as how far from this town is the next town. So it's about 6 days. So packing 6 days of food plus a couple extra just in case, and then the next, A to B, B to C, C to D kind of thing, and just breaking it down that way. It just allows for a bit more flexibility as well, just in case you needed more time or you needed more supplies or a storm came through or something like that. A lot less daunting that way.
Yeah. So you have to understand, don't you? I imagine you have to understand because I see you did a coastal navigation and tidal planning. So you have to understand the nature of the sea, don't you? Because it presumably can change at a moment's notice. So you almost have to be a weather forecaster as well. Is it a little like that? You have to be super aware of what's happening around you.
Yeah, definitely. It's a potentially very dangerous stretch of water. There's some real big hazards, which are all sort of tidal based. So if you get to the wrong area at the wrong phase of the tide, you could be faced with whirlpools, rapids, standing waves, and things like that. So having good tidal planning means you're going to get to those areas at slack water where you can just easily paddle through and it's no big deal. So yeah, you definitely have to be aware of how the ocean works and how it moves, and then planning your day around that. Which means some days you might only go 8 kilometers because that's how far you get, and then the tide turns on you, and it's impossible to fight the tide in some of these really narrow sections where you get really fast tides. And then other days, if things line up well, that you are following the tide, and then as it then changes and follows you once again. You can actually have some really big days because the ocean is pushing you all day long. So yeah, the tidal movements is the big thing, and then the weather itself is almost a bit of a take it as it comes kind of thing, because the forecasting for the weather around there is not great. Phone signal and radio signal kind of runs out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I guess, as you say, you have people you check in with ever so often when you go on a longer trip. I imagine.
Yeah, so with that one, we had a GPS device where every day we'd press a button that would send an auto email to people that we've put on the list, which would be both of our families and close friends. So they get an email saying Chris and Nuka are okay, and it would also have our coordinates. They could click a link and actually see on a satellite where we were, which is quite cool for people to follow along.
Yeah. So what can people expect um, to see when they're going kayaking? Obviously, it depends on the area in which they go. So what did you see when you did your super long trip?
Yeah, so it depends where you go. Funny enough, I'm actually planning to put together a group trip um, to the north end of Vancouver Island, which is one of the highlights of this big trip that I did do. So hopefully, I can actually show some people this area next year. But some of the highlights are things like killer whales. The trip I'm actually going to take people to is to an area called Blackfish Sound, which is named after killer whales in the area. Humpback whales, another big one. You see bears, black bears, grizzly bears. There are dolphins in that area. Lots of sea lions, seals, um, bald eagles. There's a load of bald eagles around there. Yeah, it's a real thriving area for marine mammals and wildlife, and just incredible some of the encounters you get. People often when they come on these trips. So I've spent 2 summers guiding on Vancouver Island, doing these sort of wildlife tours. And people, when you ask what their expectations are, what do you want to get out of the trip, they often say, "I want to kayak as close to a whale as possible." And then you tell them, "Well, wait until you see one," and then we're fortunate that a whale pops up, and then they're like, "Should we back up?" Like, yes, definitely back up, because once you realize how big these things are, the size of a school bus going past you, you don't want to go anywhere near them.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the size because when I was in Australia many uh, years ago, I visited an old whaling station, and this lady was describing this skeleton that this poor whale had been beached, and she was describing the size, and you could literally drive a vehicle through the middle of its um, body, and then at the end she just threw in, "Oh, by the way, this is a baby." It was about 70 or 80 feet long. So, uh, I mean, they're phenomenal size creatures. So I suppose when they pop up, you're not really seeing very much of them at all, are you?
No, you often see. Well, first you'll hear the blow when they breathe, which is it's like a cannon or a shotgun blast going off. So you hear that, and then you'll see the water vapor shoot up, and then you'll kind of see the hump, and then it just keep going and going. You don't really see the whole thing at the same time, and just kind of see a bit surface, and then the tail will come up at the end there, and yeah, just seeing the tail, you kind of get a bit of a perspective for it. But yeah, it's only once you actually see a full skeleton that you get the whole thing in one perspective, and you realize how massive they are. But even dolphins as well. Most people don't realize how massive dolphins are until you're in a kayak next to them.
They're incredibly fast too, aren't they?
Yeah, just a flick of the tail and they're gone.
Because I was going to say about Wales that there's a bit of element of mystery about them still. Do you think that's true? We don't really know um, what they do or where they go when they're not on the surface.
Yeah, definitely. I think they are. Most animals, in fact, are a lot more intelligent than we have often given them credit for. And I think, particularly marine mammals like whales, dolphins, and killer whales as well, the fact that most of their life is spent out of sight, that we really don't know what they get up to, or we don't understand their communication. They move in ways that are beyond our comprehension. And I think, as a whole, we should probably do a bit more to protect them and their spaces. With shipping lanes and big ocean traffic, it really does affect them a lot more than we realize.
Yes, absolutely. And well, the only place I've seen dolphins was also in Australia, and they seem a bit like seals. They seem very curious about us as we are um, about them. Is that kind of is that fair? Are they like that everywhere you encounter them?
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate on some Baja, Mexico kayak trips I've done, which I'm actually going to go back to in a month's time, which I'm looking forward to. I've had some really great dolphin encounters there, and they often you see them moving in, whichever way they're traveling, and we stop the kayaks and we just have a look, and then they'll completely divert their course and they'll come over to the boats and they'll go under the boats and sometimes jump very close to them, and it's almost like they're trying to play with you and just have that interaction. They're very curious, they're very smart. If they see these big 16-foot multicolored sort of fiberglass or plastic objects in the water, they obviously want to go and check it out. And they come and it's always very friendly. Like I've never felt intimidated from any of these encounters. They just seem really playful and curious. And we're not on the menu. They're not going to eat us or anything, but they're just there to check you out and just want to come and see what's going on.
Yeah. No, it's no. I think it's one of those as you say, those encounters are very fascinating, aren't they? So, um, so some of the places people go kayaking, I wouldn't have thought. I would never have considered going there. I mean, I've heard of the Galapagos Islands, but people have got, they occasionally go out to Antarctica. I think that seems a very harsh and lonely place. You're not going to meet anybody out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have a few friends that have worked down for the Antarctica season, and it seems really incredible. For wildlife trips. I don't know how long they're out on the water for, but they are wearing pretty thick and airtight or watertight, should I say, dry suits when they go out. But again, they're there mostly to see the wildlife. A lot of whales go down there, orcas as well. So I think they do sort of day trips out of the big um, cruise ship explorer boats and paddle with the icebergs and then see various wildlife down there too. So yeah, that's a bucket list destination for me to get down to paddle.
I was going to say, so there isn't really a physical base in that part of the world. You have to have a support ship of some description.
Yeah, I think they sort of have a like a mothership basically that they'll launch from, and then they might land in certain places, but we'll be doing sort of day trips out from the boat, and then they'll sail back to wherever it is that they've come from. Sort of do like 2 to 3 week trips at a time, I think, off of the big boats.
Mm. So, like a lot of us, Chris, when it came to the pandemic, it kind of well, not to put too fine a word of it, it screwed a lot of things up. Um, so, did it force you to adjust the what you were doing and the way you were looking at things? How did it? Um, what was the experience like for you?
Yeah, it was a tricky time. Obviously, having my life and career sort of tailored to adventure travel, working overseas, seasonal jobs, it was quite disruptive in that respect. However, I guess I'm fortunate to say it kind of went as good as it could have gone for me. That I went back to the UK, stayed with my parents who are now based down in Cornwall. So I was doing some kayak guiding there for the summer, and then I went up to Scotland to spend the winter there at Glencoe Ski Resort, and then actually used that time to work on my own company, build up my website, and sort of launch that really. So it was some time to actually focus on a lot of jobs that I've been wanting to do for a while, and sort of forced me to be in a room with a laptop and just kind of make the most of it as I could. So yeah, I tried to do the best I could. Obviously, there was days where it was all a bit rubbish, and you just kind of want it to be over and get back on with things and get back to what I was doing. The unknown of how long is it going to be until I can actually carry on with my life. But I am grateful that I was at least able to make a as positive as possible experience using that time.
And yeah, I kind of figured it probably was a time that kind of pushed you towards building your own business. out of it?
Yeah, it was something I'd wanted to do for a long time, but to actually sit down and and make it all legit, find local partners, figure out how I'm going to go about doing it, and then promoting the trips and launching it. So yeah, it was around that time that it all came together.
So yeah, was it a leap of faith, or you'd already done enough trips to know roughly what you know what was needed?
Yeah, it was a bit of a slow build. I think it was maybe 2016. No, sorry, 2018 is when I had the idea that I wanted to do my own trips. I actually met a guide doing something similar to what I was doing, who would do kayak trips all over Europe, and she would go and work with local suppliers, rent equipment off of them, and then bring her own groups and do her own trips. And I'd never come across someone doing that before, so I it kind of planted the seed. I knew I wanted to do it, but I wasn't ready. So I was slowly trying to grow my social media platforms, trying to sort of build the audience first, and then have a product to launch to them at a later date. So yeah, it took some years kind of working on that, and then around 2020 is when I thought that I might have enough people interested to start taking my own groups just in the shoulder season at first. So that way there's not too much pressure. I'd still work my summer and winter jobs and then try and do one trip in the shoulder season, which is spring or autumn, and then build from there. So the first trip, I actually took a group to Sicily. We went kayaking there, which is where I used to work, like we just spoke about. And then the year after that, I took two groups to Kilimanjaro, and then I've just slowly been building since then. And this year is the first year I'll be working full time, just doing my own trips during the summer, just piecing different expeditions together. Yeah, it's just really exciting. It's been a slow build, but it's been a lot of fun, kind of figuring these things out, and getting a lot of support from people I know. Everyone is very encouraging, happy to see what I'm doing. I have friends from over the years, different seasons, different countries who want to come on these trips, and they spread the word. And other people I found through social media and word of mouth that just want to come and experience an adventure, a big adventure tour, hiking, trekking, or kayaking, but they just don't have the either the knowledge to do it themselves, or they might not have the friend group to go and do something like that in a safe way. So a lot of people just want to have a real experience, but in a sort of more social and managed way for them.
Yeah, so I suppose if you've not done it before, people are looking for an easy way in, aren't they? They want the adventure, but without, um, I don't know, I was going to say without the danger, but
Yeah, they want to remove the risk of not necessarily like experiencing the wild and the nature, but they want to remove the risk of it going wrong. It's things like just turning up and trying to find someone to rent equipment with, or not knowing the navigation, not knowing the weather forecasting. These are people that have their own careers, they have busy lives, they only have limited holiday every year. If you only have one or two trips away each year, you just can't afford for it to not go as well as you want it to go. So it just gives people peace of mind that this is going to be an incredible trip, because every detail is handled for them, and they can actually just relax and focus on just turning up, having a good time, and not worrying about any logistics.
yeah, well, well, if you've got limited time, that's that's a good service to be offering. A friend of mine went to Tanzania, and I think he was tempted to go because I think somebody told him that, well, if you're going to climb a mountain, that is the easiest. He probably used the word easy in a relative sense, but he said if you're going to start anywhere, Tanzania is a place. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd always be hesitant to use the word easy because that definitely lures people in who get a serious wake up call when they get there. Um, it is the one of the biggest non-technical mountains. So it's, I guess, comparatively, it's the easiest of the seven summits. So the biggest mountains on each continent. Kilimanjaro is the biggest in Tanzania, so compared to all the others, it's a bit easier to achieve, but it's certainly not easy in terms of the challenge. Um, it does take some serious effort. It is very high up. 5,895 meters is a lot of elevation to deal with. So interestingly, the demographic who don't summit the most, the people who sort of think it's going to be easier than it is, are males 20 to 30 years old, because they've been told it's easy and they have friends that have done it and like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. So that demographic often choose the quickest route, which is 5 days, and then they just get hammered by the altitude. Altitude sickness is a horrible feeling. So that's the demographic that turn back, or are most likely to turn back. Whereas older people, they are a bit more conscious of that. They want to give themselves the best possible chance, so they book longer trips, 7, 8, even up to 12 days, and in that way, they're only dealing with the walk itself, which is just a hike. You don't need ropes, you don't need to climb or anything. You're just walking every day. But by going slow and taking a much longer route, then it just alleviates a bit of the risk from the altitude sickness.
And and presumably interesting landscapes and wildlife to see along the way. Um,
Yeah, it's much more enjoyable that way. That's the big thing that I try and explain to my groups, is that you want it to be an enjoyable experience. So you might be able to get to the summit without any training, but it's going to be tough. You're going to feel awful. You're not going to enjoy it, and it's going to be a struggle the whole time. You'll just be looking at your feet, trying to soldier through each day. But if you take it seriously, spend the 6 months prior doing as much walking, as many steps, take training seriously, it means you're going to come across it and be like, oh, this is actually a lot more manageable. Your head is up, you're enjoying the view, you're taking photos, you're not short of breath on the first day, and then the whole thing becomes an enjoyable experience, which is what the best thing to do is, rather than trying to rush up to the summit.
yeah, you can try and get somewhere too quickly, I'm sure. So it's probably too difficult a question to answer. Uh, but if I was just to say mountains or kayaking or snowboarding, would you be able to choose?
I would probably say, on a personal level, the activity I enjoy the most would be snowboarding. But in terms of the groups that I enjoy leading the most, it would be kayaking. Kayaking is a lot more chill. It's very relaxing trips. The mountain trips are hard work. It is challenging. It's tough. It's dirty. It's sweaty. So it is hard work. Kayaking, we just float about and we look at wildlife. We lay on the beach, do some reading, lay in the sun. So yeah, that's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I suppose the advantage of traveling a lot, um, I can only imagine certain places have a much deeper meaning for you than others, and as a result, um, you want to keep going back there. Do you have places like that?
Yeah, places where you get real connections with the locals, where you really do feel welcomed. I'm sure we've all been to countries where you actually have a bit of a rude interaction with a local person, and maybe even feel like you're not welcome. I won't name any places, but I've certainly felt that in some areas. Whereas Tanzania is one of the places where I've always felt welcomed. I've always enjoyed being there. The local people love their country, and they love that you are there to visit, and they really want you to go and tell everybody how great Tanzania is, and to go back with them. So in a weird way, it kind of feels like returning to just a well-known place where I do feel at home now that I've been there like 5 times, I think. I'm going back and I'm seeing the same people from the very first trip. They are my friends. We stay in touch, and it's just good to go and hang out with those people. So yeah, Tanzania is probably one of the places I have that connection with.
Yeah. No, it's good to have those. It's good to have those connections in life. That's that's why that's why traveling is such a good thing, isn't it? It just opens opens doors, opens our minds. Um, and it's I was listening. I do like looking at a lot of YouTube channels, and two young lads from Sweden were trying to work out where their real home was. So they knew they were from Sweden, but they didn't, having travelled so much, they didn't feel quite so Swedish as they as they were before. Do you think do you think that happens? You know, is that kind of you're not sure, you become more nomadic and you don't feel quite so connected to anywhere in particular.
Yeah, maybe. I've felt for a while. I kind of go through phases where, um, not really being too interested in the UK. But then actually having gone back due to COVID, it really did spark a new sense of pride in the UK and in the areas around there. And I really do feel like people should go and visit it. I used to always bump into people traveling and they'd tell me they're about to go visit the UK, and I'd kind of like wonder why. But having been there during COVID and explored a bit more, Cornwall, Dorset into Wales, up in Scotland, just along the coasts in particular. Um, yeah, just really, kind of having more of a connection or pride in being from there, but not necessarily to a specific place there or or wanting to live there myself. But I do sort of appreciate a lot of the good that has come from there, and especially that's a lot of early adventurers, travelers, and explorers have come from there. And being from the UK is a big sort of outdoor industry place. So yeah.
And of course, it's a tremendous amount of variety in the UK, isn't there? I always fascinates me how landscapes change so much, and you don't have to travel massive differences. Having done a bit of traveling in Australia, you have to go hundreds of, even thousands of kilometers before you see a change of scenery sometimes. Yet in the UK, it's changing all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so densely packed with different history and ideas, and yeah, like the geography and the landscapes for such a comparatively small place. It really does have a lot packed into it.
Do you think history plays an important part in our traveling lives?
As in our own history or history in general.
Well, perhaps perhaps it's a little different for you because you're doing a lot more trips into nature, and of course nature's been in charge for a lot longer than we've been wandering around. Um, so I just wondered, perhaps it's less important. But how do you?
Um, I would say yeah, it does. I think it is something I actually find quite fascinating is the history of the places I go to. I often find myself when I'm wandering around, thinking back to how this area would have been, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, with the sort of early settlers or indigenous people of each area. Like I do find it fascinating going to museums and then wandering around and learning of the history of each place. I think that's a really fun aspect of travel, to sort of self-educate and get those lessons on the history whilst you are there. But then, yeah, a lot of stuff I do is nature based, but it also still ties in, where a lot of cultures are based quite strongly around nature. So in Nepal and in the Himalayas, for example, the religions there, the Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, is massively about nature and the mountains around them. There's certain mountains that they refer to as God mountains, which you're not allowed to climb. Um, where they believe it could be a home of Shiva from Hinduism and various other beliefs. The Sherpa people have always been very self-managing when it comes to nature. There's certain, you're not allowed to chop trees down. You're not allowed to do certain things, growing crops in certain areas. So there's definitely a strong tie between the history and culture and nature of all these places, and that kind of hits the nail on the head of everything that I'm into when I find these spots, which is probably why I like going back there so much.
Yeah, one one or two words get banded around these days, and you have a section on your website all about sustainability and ecotourism. Do you think certain words in our language gets hijacked and they're not really being used um, in the way they ought to be, or perhaps we're applying different meanings to them?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm very aware of the whole what they call greenwashing, where just calling anything an eco villa or whatever, throwing eco or sustainable, kind of just makes people feel good, but it doesn't actually mean anything. There's no like real way of certifying or knowing that. So I think it's definitely down to the individual to try and figure that out for themselves. Like really wondering, is where I'm going or what I'm paying for, is that having a positive impact on the community or the area that you're in? And I guess the multinational corporatization, I'm not sure if that's a word, but I'm going to use it, of travel, it kind of is removing a lot of the stuff from the local communities and is making it, it's a lot cheaper, but people are booking with like massive corporations that are kind of just running down the bottom line for these local people. So I guess that's just one example when it comes to booking tours, is just trying to find a independently owned local operator, because that's probably who the big multinational corporation is hiring anyway. But if you go directly to them, they get a lot more of the money, and then they get to spend it how they wish. And a lot of them, they do actually have different initiatives for protecting the environment and the areas around them. So, yeah, the bit on my website you're referring to is just kind of making a discussion about that, really, just different ways people can think about ecotourism, ethical tourism. Is that even a thing? And how to try and support those places.
Do you think is it possible to do everything that you've been describing, but actually scale it? Um, because one thing that's happening is that there's more people traveling than ever. You know, there may be 8 billion of us, but I mean, one statistic from last year was that five billion of those stepped on an aeroplane at least once, which is a phenomenal number of people. Uh, do you think it's possible for us to reconcile what we want and what we can provide?
It's a tricky thing because I think a big reason why more people are traveling is that more people are, sort of, or more countries are getting more money. They're kind of getting a bigger middle class. People having the ability to travel because they have more disposable income. So it's only fair that those people would want to experience stuff that a lot of other countries have always done, which is traveling around, experiencing new places. So I feel as the general quality of life throughout the world increases, people are going to have access to those kind of things. So I guess what comes with that is the negative side of so many people traveling in terms of like emissions and what impact it has on local places. I've always personally been a bit of an optimist on all of these things. I don't necessarily have the answers or know what the solutions are, but I've always felt that humanity is good at solving problems as they arise. And unfortunately, they usually need to be profitable for anyone to actually work on it or to implement it. But I always feel that there is a way that when these problems arise, someone will hopefully find a solution. And if enough people with enough brain power can really think about it, then hopefully there is a way that everyone can enjoy the planet without destroying it at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I always like to throw in is do you think do you think there are a lot of hidden gems that regular travelers miss out on?
Yeah, I think that is one benefit. I find myself that, I'm full time traveling, which means time is on my side. I don't necessarily feel like I need to go on a day tour or to go and explore every single day because I have some time to do that. It means I can do the the bigger things, and then I could maybe just spend a day wandering around a street or something like that. So it kind of is a way to access a few more of those hidden spots because you actually slow down and you're not following a jam-packed schedule and itinerary where you have to do the top 5 things in each place and then go on to the next one because you just can't fit everything in. So there's obviously a lot missed when you do follow an itinerary like that. However, it's just how it is. If you don't have the time, you kind of need to hit all those major spots whilst you can. So yeah, I guess something that is nice, or if people could, if possible, would be to add more just days to walk around and explore and days that aren't actually planned. Because often some of my favorite experiences are when I just wander around and I'll just go for a coffee, read my book, and then wander, go to the next place, and just kind of aimlessly walk around a town or a city with no particular plan. And then you're just open to the experience. You meet people, you follow your nose, you just kind of find stuff as you go.
So it's moving slowly then is the key, isn't it? Because uh, we often, as you say, we rush around way too quickly, and we could miss some really interesting experiences.
Yeah, and I wonder whether people, with the rise of working online, at least, um, whether those people now, I feel like if anyone works in an office and has the ability to work online, just to go and take a month and do what they call it, workcation, they're calling them now. So you go and just live in Sicily, for example, for 2 months, and you're still working, but you get to just enjoy it, and you don't travel, so to speak. You just be somewhere and exist in a new place, and that's how you really get to know it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot more. The visa systems around the world are certainly getting a lot easier in that respect.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to find ways for people that are earning money to come into their country, because even if they're earning in the UK, they're going to be spending in the local economy. So that can only be a good thing, surely.
Yeah. So, as a traveler, do you what things do you see that work well, and what things do you think could work better in the travel industry? Do you think?
Um, I think visas are something that should be improved. I feel like all the visa systems should be done online. Um, Particularly for me, as I get a lot of work visas, that the process of doing it is very outdated. For example, to get a Japanese work visa or even a working holiday visa, you have to go to the embassy in person and give them your passport for 5 days, and then go back to the embassy and collect your passport. And things like that, I think, could be done online and could be a lot smoother and a lot quicker. Same with a lot of airfare. I think there's a lot of stuff involved that makes it a very stressful experience when we should be a bit further ahead by now. Seems like air travel is almost getting slower and more congested, and flights are always getting postponed. Um, so that's something that seems like it could do with a fix. Things that are easier though would be the ability to just turn up and figure it all out when you get there. Having access to the internet and all the information you could ever need about a place. Having Google Maps is just amazing. Even if you don't have a SIM card, you just go to like a 7-Eleven or a McDonald's and just get the free Wi-Fi. Go on Google Maps and type in where you're trying to go, and then follow it offline. So moving around overseas has definitely got a lot easier.
Mm. I noticed one of your things that you've you've looked into is being a wilderness first responder. So does that mean that people do get lost then, and people have to go and rescue them?
Yeah, so that's more a like an advanced first aid qualification, because during my trips we are in wilderness scenarios, which basically means you're more than 2 hours away from the help you might need. So more than 2 hours from a hospital, essentially. So it just means there's certain things you can do to help someone that you wouldn't normally do with first aid. So um, it generally means if someone's hurt, you might actually need to move them and get them somewhere else. Whereas with normal first aid, it's usually just leave them there and try and make them comfortable until help comes to them. But yeah, wilderness first aid might mean you have to help someone move like 5 miles to get to a trailhead, and then an ambulance could meet them there, or whatever. But having that qualification, people can then use it for working with rescue teams, ski patrol, for example, or working for mountain rescue in different parts of the UK. Would probably have wilderness first aid, or maybe even something higher, just as a way to help those people and get them down to where they need before an ambulance could pick them up.
Yes, it's one of those things that's needed these days, but obviously we all hope that it's hardly ever needed. Um, One place I went to in Australia was what they call the flying doctor service, and I was absolutely blown away by the sheer stupendous distances they have to be prepared to cover. And it's all just on little aeroplanes and whatever kit they put in, and if they can, they lift them up and take them back, as you say, to other bases where they can get the help that they need. Because well, people do get lost from time to time. That's just the nature of the game, I guess.
Yeah, and even in the UK, I'm sure I read somewhere that on mainland Britain, you're never more than 2 miles away from a road, something like that. And even despite of that, people still get lost and need to phone in mountain rescue regularly up in the hills. People that are underprepared, or the wind and the visibility goes, and their phone dies, and they actually have never learned to read a map and have no idea where they are. So yeah, good skills to have. First aid qualifications. It is more likely that you're going to need it coming across a stranger. Actually, the only very fortunate, other than like quite minor first aid um, situations, the only major one I've ever had to deal with was coming across a motorbike accident. And I think those are the situations where you're more likely going to use it, because if you are with your friends and you all know what you're doing in the mountains, or at least have your head fairly screwed on, um, chances are you're going to be okay. And it's usually just coming across other people where you might need to use those emergency skills.
Yeah, but obviously it's all there as a backup, and of course the trips you arrange are well, for people to gain new experiences, but obviously it's a chance to meet other people, isn't it, with similar interests and desires. Um, it must be very interesting, and you don't have very large groups, do you? So it's a good chance to get other people with similar to get to know people with similar interests.
Yeah, it's always really fun. People that join these trips, sometimes they might come with one friend or two friends, but generally people don't know anyone else on the trip other than me. So they're coming in as strangers, and other than a communication on WhatsApp for like a month before it, they've not really met or hung out before. So it's really amazing how quickly people go from strangers to really good friends, and they want to stay in touch, and people have met up with each other since the trips. People will then come on other trips. I get a lot of return guests, which is really good. People will come on one trip and then another one a couple of years later, and sometimes would then know people from past trips just from doing that. So yeah, it's really cool, the social side. People often ask, if almost every group, they ask me, do groups always get on as well as we're getting on? And the honest answer is yes. These kind of trips are very self-selecting. The type of person that is going to book a 6-day kayak trip or a 16-day trek in the Himalayas is a very specific type of person. And anyone that books that kind of thing, you're going to get on with each other. So you already have that shared interest. And there's, in nature, in the outdoors, even if you want your own space, it's very easy just to walk a few meters ahead or behind, or in the kayak just paddle off a little bit and have a bit of me time. That's absolutely fine and easy to do. But having the social aspect of people to enjoy a shared experience with is really cool.
Yeah, I think it certainly is. And I was going to say something. What was I going to say? Oh yes. Well, of course, these trips don't are not. You plan. you plan them a long way ahead. So that means a lot of organization um, happens behind the scenes, so that when people show up, it's already there prepared for them. But you have to think about these things a long way in advance, don't you?
Yeah, it's very funny because my personal travel style is super last minute. Like I will book hotels on the same day. I'll take a train to a new city and then just find somewhere to stay when I arrive and figure out what to do. So I'm personally a very last minute traveler. However, through these trips, it's the opposite. I plan things a year in advance, sometimes longer, because I go out and I scout each trip personally before I ever put it on my website. So I meet my local partners, I do the trip with them, whether it's joining one of their kayak groups or joining a trek and going to experience it myself. So I can get the marketing photos, meet the local team, make sure it's up to the standards that I am wanting and requiring, which it always is because I'm quite good at finding partners now. So I go and meet them, start planning, and then it gives me a year or so to actually market the trip and try and find the group and put the stuff together. So yeah, it starts quite far in advance, which is funny for me to have my trip schedule for 2026 already planned. Like I've never had that in my life before to to know what I'm doing next year. It's usually just one season at a time and then figure it out. So it's kind of nice to have things on the calendar and knowing where I'm going to be.
So, what are you most looking forward to this year and next?
Good question. I think I'm always looking forward to the new trips the most. So each year I add a brand new one. So the new trip this year is in Croatia. There's a 6-day kayak trip, and actually got a lot of interest. I'm doing two of those, one in August, one in September, because some people prefer to travel outside of school holidays, and some people have to. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. That's the brand new one this year, and then next year the new one, potentially two actually, will be Vancouver Island, which I've already spent a lot of time there, so that's going to be sort of returning to a place I know well. And then I'm actually looking to move a bit more off the beaten path, find some trips that not that many people are doing. So I'm actually looking to put one together in one of the stans, so maybe Kazakhstan, maybe Tajikistan. I'm sort of researching that area right now, and I'll probably go and scout it out myself this summer to then get a new trip together for next year. So it might be mountain based. It might actually be a horse packing trip, which I think would be really cool. Spending 6 days using horses to go through Kazakhstan and explore a bit more of the culture. So that one's a bit up in the air, but this is what I really love about doing these trips and the business that I'm creating and in the process of building is that it's getting me out and doing these really amazing experiences that I can then share with other people a little bit further down the line.
So, would that be similar to going to somewhere like I don't know, Mongolia? Because they're meant to be, you can have experiences with wild horses. Um,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Tajikistan has more mountains, which is one thing I was looking at. But then, yeah, what really appeals is something different, which I think, yeah, Kazakhstan or Mongolia, um, horse riding and staying in yurts or camping just sounds really wild. I'm not sure of many people doing it, and I feel like it's the type of trip you would prefer to go with someone like me who is going to sort of verify and check all the things out before you turn up. Because I mean, I don't personally know anything about those areas, so there's a lot to discover.
and travel is about discovery and being very curious, isn't it? So, um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think that's one of the joys of travel for me is that I guess the more you've travelled, you get a bit fussier about where you go. Um, but I think in the end, whatever we choose, well, we're never going to run out of things to do, are we?
Yeah, I definitely feel there's no right or wrong. Sometimes people like to say their style is the best or whatever, but everyone is so individual. Some people travel purely for food, some people travel for the history, or some people like to just do outdoor sports. So I don't think it really matters what that is. It's just cool that people are getting out and, chasing their own interests around the world and just kind of making the whole world a little bit smaller, building those connections with new people.
And it's the connections that makes the world a stronger place in a way, isn't it? I think that's sometimes what we don't do enough of. So the more times we can hold hands across the world, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's been absolutely amazing having a chat to you, Chris, talking about some of your many adventures and those to come. I could probably talk to you for a lot longer than we have. So, yeah, I do thank you enormously for taking the time to come on the podcast today. And yeah, I hope that the trips that you're going on will be fun, and the ones that you're planning will come off. So thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. My favorite topic to talk about is travel and adventure. Yeah, I feel like I could go for a long time. So yeah, thanks for having me on, and it's great to chat with you.
Thank you very much.